Buckle up, kids, because we're going to one of the most chaotic places on the internet, r/premed. So today I thought it would be fun to scroll through Reddit and see how many questions I could answer. Before we get started, if you don't know, I applied to medical school last year, and even though this year's cycle is looking kind of different because of COVID, I still want to be as helpful to you as possible. Alright, let's get started.
I'm going into my junior year with no clinical volunteering experience. Will I have time to get my hours before I apply?
Do not panic. I repeat, do not panic. I was in the exact same situation going into my third year with a whopping 0 volunteer hours. I had focused almost exclusively on research and my part-time jobs for the first couple of years of school, so I really just didn't have any room to volunteer up until my third year. I ended up with almost 100 hours of volunteer experience that year. I'm gonna level with you, it was hard, but I did it and so can you. The way I did it was I participated in 2 different clinical volunteering experiences. For the first one, I volunteered at an outpatient clinic, and this was really more your generic hospital volunteering experience. I was restocking supplies and cleaning down patient rooms. I did get a little bit of patient interaction by wheeling patients out to the car after they'd had their procedure, but in general, this was really a more behind-the-scenes experience. The second program I did had a lot more patient interaction, and that's something that AdComs really want to see. So if you're crunched for time, definitely go for programs that are going to give you the maximum amount of time with patients. My program was actually an educational program for pediatric patients, so we would go to a children's hospital and teach the kids activities that had to do with like your blood cells or the different parts of your brain, and we would get to play games with them and just really have a lot of fun, and I even got to talk to a lot of their families and hear their stories. So not only was I getting the hours that I needed, but it was a really rewarding experience and gave me a lot of things to talk about in my application.
Should I include my hobbies in the work and activities section, and if so, how should I list them?
Yes, absolutely! Don't worry if it has nothing to do with medicine. If this is something that was important to you and that you put a lot of time into, put it on your application. Medical schools don't want robots, they want people, and people have more than one type of interest. I was super conflicted in the beginning about whether or not to talk about my poetry in my application, and it was actually my mom who convinced me to put it in there because she knew just how much time and effort I had put into it over the years. And it totally paid off. Later on in the cycle, this was one of the things I got the most questions about during my interviews. When it comes to the logistics of including one of these activities, for the experience type, I put publications because I actually did have some work published in different things, but there is just a generic hobbies category if that works better for you. And for the name, I just said poetry/creative writing, which maybe wasn't the most original title, but it got the point across. And then if you want an example for how to write about these types of activities, this is the description that I used.
I emailed one of my professors asking about a letter of recommendation, but they haven't responded. Should I follow up?
Absolutely, you follow up, especially if this is the first time that you've reached out to them. Professors are super busy people, so if they don't respond to your emails, 9 times out of 10, it's not some sort of subtle denial, it's just because they didn't even see it in the first place. This was a skill that I definitely had to work on because I'm typically not a very pushy person. I don't like feeling like I'm imposing or being rude, but bottom line, you can't apply to medical school without these recommendations, so you may have to get a little bit more aggressive than what you're used to. Now, that doesn't mean keep asking if they flat out say no, but if they haven't responded, go ahead and draft a follow-up email and make sure it includes basically the same content as the first because you want to make sure that they get that information, but just start it off a little bit differently. So you could say something like, "Dear Professor so-and-so, I was reaching out to see if you had received my previous email regarding my medical school application. If you're too busy to participate, I fully understand, but if you do have the opportunity, it would be an honor to have a recommendation from you." And then you go into all the specifics. Now, if they still don't answer to that, I would say don't give up there. Go to their office in person and ask them then. This might be a little intimidating and they might say no, but at least you have your answer and you can move on to asking another recommender.
How long does it take to get your secondaries after you submit your primary?
So before I answer this, I want to give a little bit of context to those of you who haven't applied yet. So when you submit your primary application, it does not immediately go out to your med schools. The AAMC actually has to go through and do their own review of your application before they will send it out. And the time that it takes for them to do that varies depending on when you submit your application. I have heard those processing times are a lot shorter if you submit earlier in the process. But for me, I applied about 3 weeks after the application opened for submission, so it took like a solid month for them to get my application verified. But once that was done, some of the schools sent their secondaries the same day my application got processed. And I think the most that I had to wait for a school was about 2 weeks, so they start coming in pretty quickly once your application gets sent out.
Can I mention patient names in my personal statement when I'm talking about my clinical experiences?
Absolutely not. Not only is this a no-no for applications, but this is actually a HIPAA violation, which means that you're breaching patient privacy. And when I was training as a hospital volunteer, I was taught that this doesn't just include the patient's name, but also their age and even their gender. So you're gonna have to be pretty careful about how you approach this. Now, I am not discouraging you from writing about patient interactions in your essays. Actually, I'm highly encouraging it. That's like one of the coolest things you could possibly talk about. You just may have to get creative. So what I did was anytime I was referring to a patient, I just used gender neutral pronouns like they and them. That way I didn't have to worry about any sort of violation of patient confidentiality.
How can I be supportive to someone who's currently applying?
Aw, I love this question. So in case you hadn't heard, applying to medical school is hard. So having a good support system is key. One of the most helpful things my mom did for me when I was applying last year was she proofread a lot of my essays. Contrary to popular belief, you don't have to have any experience in the medical field to be able to help with this application process, because there is a ton of writing involved in this application, and so just being able to offer a fresh set of eyes can be so useful.
Does anyone else miss their MCAT studying days?
No.
How do I list future courses in my application?
Okay, so this question is probably referring to med school prereqs, and in case you're worried about this, no, you do not have to take all of these classes before you apply. You just have to take them before you actually start medical school. So there's probably a few ways of doing this, but what I did was on my MCAS, I only went up to classes I had already taken, and then later on when I got my secondaries, I had the opportunity to talk about any classes that I was planning on taking to satisfy those requirements.
Should I talk about my eating disorder in my personal statement?
This depends on the situation. If this were something that you are still struggling with today, I would say probably don't include it, but since it's something that's in your past and something you were able to overcome, I would say absolutely include it. That's a perfect example of your resilience and your determination to succeed, and those are qualities that you're gonna need to get through medical school, so I would say go for it.
I'm taking biochem right before I take my MCAT. Do you think I should still be studying that section of the prep materials?
Man, some of these questions are like scary relatable. I also ended up taking biochem right before I took my MCAT, so I feel you. The answer to this question would probably be different depending on who you ask, but for me, I chose to go ahead and start studying the prep material while I was also in the class, and I'll tell you why. You don't want to wait until right before your exam to start taking practice tests, and if you're still covering new content in the class, then you can't really expect to be ready for that. So I basically just wanted to be ahead of my class, that way I could go ahead and start taking practice tests as soon as I was ready. Alright, well we covered quite a lot today. I hope you found this useful. If you have any other topics that you'd like me to cover in a future video, please let me know down below. Thanks for watching, don't forget to like and sub, and I'll see you later. Bye! If you have any other specific topics you'd like me to cover in a future video, let me know in the what am I talking about? No!